Hello everyone, I am Matt Williamson. How's everyone doing today? I hope great. Middle of summer, kind of the dog days here at the NFL. I am going to nerd your faces off today with numbers, stats, trends, and they all apply heavily to the Steelers. So how about this? Since the year 2000 season, so nearly a quarter of a century, of all if a team is losing when the buzzer starts for the fourth quarter, this is how many wins these teams have gotten going into the fourth quarter over the last 23 seasons when losing. Like, the Saints and Panthers have only won 2 of those games. And since 2000, the Saints and Panthers, if they were losing going into the fourth quarter, have 2 wins in that stretch. 2. There's 6 teams that have 3. The Falcons have 4. There's 7 teams that have 5. There's 7 teams that have 6. There's 5 teams that have 7. And the Vikings have 8. They've won. So Minnesota, again, to reiterate, third quarter buzzer ends. You're losing on the scoreboard. Since 2000, the Vikings have 8 wins in that situation. You'd be losing by 1 point, but if you're losing, the Vikings have 8 wins. That's really good. That's better than every team in the league but 2. Kansas City, as you would imagine, have 10. They probably don't have a ton of games. Well, we're going back to 2000. Mahomes was 1 year old, 2 years old. But the Chiefs have 10 wins in which they were losing going into the fourth quarter. That's the second best in the league. Your Steelers? They have 15. That's mind-boggling to me. I mean, I don't even know exactly how to take it. Like, I put this out on Twitter, and some people wrote back to me, like, that adds up because all they want to do is play close games. I'm like, kinda. I mean, that's not even the entire Tomlin era. I definitely think there's something to be said for physical toughness, mental toughness, conditioning, turning your fate around in the fourth quarter. It's certainly a Tomlin thing. A lot of these stats that I talk about with Tomlin reflect this a great deal. You play close games, and at the end, you end up sneaking out a quick victory, and I think there's an art to that. I mean, I think a lot of people, when I put this on Twitter, X, whatever, took it as a negative. I'm like, how could you possibly take this as a negative that of 32 teams in the league, when you're losing going into the fourth quarter, your fate in this league is almost always sealed. Like, remember Cowher's record with a lead at the half. And there's a lot of instances like that. The Eagles and Andy Reid, etc. But the Steelers have pulled out 15 wins, way like double league average, and 5 more than the next best team when losing going into the fourth quarter. I thought that was something I had to bring up to you guys. I mean, I look at it as a positive. I mean, how could you not? I mean, again, not crumbling when the going gets tough or when things are not going your way. It's not like the AFC North has been a pushover during that time, So I thought that was really interesting. BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, for Major League Baseball, golf, and many others. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So if you thought I was nerdy for the first half of the podcast, just wait. I got a lot of these stats from betting sites that really study this stuff. And some of them, one of them has a against the spread connotation, but other than that, I pulled all the ones that mention the Steelers. And we can take what we want with these, but there's a lot of history that show that some of the things the Steelers did last year, amongst other teams, don't correlate to the next season in terms of wins or getting in the playoffs. So hang with me. So teams that had a positive turnover differential, okay, and won 10 or more games against the spread are teams you want to fade the next season. Like they're unlikely to do that again. Of these 88 teams since 2009, 60 of them had one-loss records that declined, and by an average of 11%. Furthermore, of the 79 teams that reached the playoffs, 33 failed to do so the following season. I mean, again, that's 10 or more wins with a positive turnover differential. You would think these are good things. You go back to the playoffs. And this applied to the Bengals, Chargers, and Giants last year. So this time, those guys fell into this trap. This year, Baltimore, Dallas, Houston, Miami, Tampa, and the Steelers fall into this category. History shows that the next year isn't kind to them. None of these are going to sound kind, by the way. Okay, bullet point 1. I got 4 or 5 of these. Bullet point 2. Only 10 of the last 46 teams that had a positive turnover differential but negative score differential qualified for the playoffs the next season. Green Bay did do it last year. Crazy, and again, this probably doesn't surprise you, Pittsburgh has now qualified for this 3 years in a row, including this year, along with the Bears, Bengals, Broncos, Colts, Giants, and Seahawks. Only 10 of 46 teams, if you have a positive turnover differential, but a negative plus-minus score differential, get into the playoffs next year. When considering negative point differential with a 500 or better record, only 8 of the 34 teams who achieved this dubious honor went on to have a better season next year, although 2 of them came last year with the Dolphins and Steelers. The average drop was a minimal 1.6 wins per season, but the margin of making the playoffs for teams like this is already small. Pittsburgh qualifies for this for the 3rd straight season as well. I mean, they're such an outlier with close games and all these things. The Seahawks, Colts, and Bengals also qualify for this. So, pretty crazy. Since 2001, there have been 50 teams that have managed to win 10 games or more, despite scoring less than 23 points per game. Okay. In the follow-up season, only 9 of these teams improved, while 38 dropped by an average of 4.3 games in the win column. 4.3 games difference on average. Baltimore went against the trend last year. They ended up going 10-7 and went up to 13-4. This year, there's only 2 teams affected by it. Your Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs. How about that? The Chiefs averaged under 23 points per game last year, but won more than 10 games. It's a bad sign for the future going forward. Although, and I was going to end with this, I got one more bullet point. The Steelers and Tomlin and the stuff I started the show with buck all these trends, and they don't buck them for 1 year. It's for decades. It's for big stretches of games at a time. I have a hard time thinking that's fluky. Anyway, again, I'm a Tomlin supporter, but I think these are things people don't understand, that he gets more out of teams than you can really put your finger on at times. And some of these stats really reflect that. Here's the last one I got. Only 2 of the last 13 teams since 2020 that had a turnover differential better than 0.5 per game improved its record the next season. The average one-loss percentage decline of the other 11 teams was 17%. It's huge. Or the equivalent to just under 3 wins per season. Remember, they didn't play 17 games. Arizona qualified on this angle going into 2022 and saw the biggest drop. They went from 11-6 to 4-13. Yes, your Steelers are also affected by this as well, as are the Ravens, Bengals, Cowboys, Texans, Saints, Giants, and Niners. That's all I got. Take what you want from those. Some of them are a little hard to follow, but they're basic things like if you have a winning record and negative point differential, or you get in the playoffs, and because a lot of it is plus minus in turnovers, I'm paraphrasing, it's hard to duplicate. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but there's a lot of history here. Things like 2 out of the last 50 and blah, blah, blah. That's a lot. But I also can make a strong argument that the Steelers that we're looking at today at the end of June are a better football team than we saw when they got eliminated from the playoffs a couple months ago. So take with that what you want, but I think there's some trends there that are pretty darn notable. All right, take care.